Hey there guys, if you want to figure out how to make a quick and easy foraging toy for a parrot, I am going to be covering that in this video, and that's going to be coming up right after this. Hey there guys, this is Jack over at Hi Redbird, where I am tirelessly working to find new ways to make the keeping of exotic animals and pets more exciting, more affordable, and ultimately more enjoyable. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make this pretty simple toy right here. It's a pretty easy thing to do. You can easily throw it together with items that you have around the house, and it's going to take a minute to 2 minutes tops to be able to make this toy. So especially if you have multiple birds, you're going to be able to make items like this for multiple birds that you have. Now, one thing I do like to do, I do like to make these toys out of things like wrapping paper, and you can make them for, if it's your bird's hatch day, if you can make it for Christmas, you can make theme toys for your animals, and that can be a whole lot of fun. Now, I'm going to be honest. Your bird probably doesn't care that it's Christmas or that it's hatch day. But as animal caretakers, if we address things like that, if we make it fun for us, we are far more likely to make items like that for our animals on a more regular basis. So I definitely encourage, even though sometimes it may seem a little bit weird, make it fun for you too, because when you're making enrichment for your animals, you're also enriching yourself. So that part is really important. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into how you are going to make this. All right, guys. So the items needed to make this toy are actually pretty straightforward. All should be things that you do have around the house. For starters, you are going to need some type of tube. So you could use either a paper towel tube or a toilet paper tube, whatever you have on hand. If you use that paper towel tube, you can use that for a much bigger bird, or you could always cut it down to the appropriate size. The toilet paper tube is going to be a really good size for most birds. Smaller birds are going to have no problem with it, and bigger birds like macaws and cockatoos will think it's a tremendously enjoyable foot toy. So you can definitely use that size, the toilet paper roll, for both small and large birds. Now you are going to need some items to fill this with. So for starters, you might want to look at something like shredded paper. This shredded paper here is a little bit boring, so you also could use something like colored tissue paper. You could tear that, use that to fill the entire paper towel or toilet paper roll. You are going to want some small toys or small items that could go into your toy. So here I've got an assortment of wooden beads. Now, when I was getting everything set up for this project, I also pulled out this small plastic ball. It does have a bell inside. A lot of my smaller birds will like this, but this toy is ultimately going to be going to a small cockatoo. So this is an important time to point out that you always want to make sure that the items you're putting inside a toy are appropriate and sized appropriately for the animal that you are giving it to. Since a cockatoo's beak, even a small cockatoo, would have no problem completely breaking through this plastic. There would be a risk of ingesting plastic. The bell inside is not very strong. I would then worry about a cockatoo's beak crimping that and a lot of issues that could arise from that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this item. If I was making this toy for a smaller parrot, of course that item could be appropriate, but you always just want to make sure, take a look at what you are making, take into consideration your individual animal, because every single animal is going to be different. Now, I have some smaller parrots, some small conures that are highly, highly aggressive chewers that I probably would not give that ball to. I also have a senior cockatoo. She is at the very least in her mid to late 50s. She is very, very delicate with everything. She does have a little bit of arthritis at this point, and I could probably give her that ball safely. So size isn't the only consideration that you have to make. So just think about your individual bird. Try to make decisions based on what is safe for that individual animal. Now I am going to use some dried seeds. I've also got some dried papaya, dried banana chips in there. One thing I am going to recommend for this toy, if you make it, because it has so many paper products, I would avoid something that is a very high moisture content. I would want to avoid things like slices of banana, fresh papaya, fresh melons, because with all of the paper that is there, you do run the risk of this getting very, very soggy very, very quickly. And of course, the final thing that you're going to need is you're going to need some kind of paper to wrap everything up. So you could always just use something like newspaper, or again, you could just use some tissue paper. Now, one thing you can do, one thing I like to do, especially around the holidays, I like to make these using wrapping paper. You want to make sure that you are using a wrapping paper that is safe. You want to be careful because a lot of wrapping papers can include a waxy finish to their paper. That's going to be something that you want to avoid. And especially now, there are a lot of wrapping papers that have things like glitter or a foil tinsel component to the paper. So there are small bits of foil worked into the paper. I would avoid all of those. But you could always use something like just generic newsprint or tissue paper. You could always use something like heavy-duty brown butcher paper. That would make this toy a little bit more difficult for something like a cockatoo or a macaw. Other adjustments you could make, instead of using something like this crumpled brown paper or this blue tissue paper, you could again use something like shredded collard greens, shredded mustard greens. I would probably avoid things like romaine lettuce, the butter lettuces, because again, you want to try to avoid something with a very, very high moisture content. Those are going to tend to bleed out as they get cut up, so they will make things around them really, really soggy. But the heavier greens, so collard greens, kale, turnip greens, mustard greens, those you can usually cut up and have a much better chance making something like this. All right, so let's see if I can make this without completely knocking over my camera setup. You guys are not allowed to know how many times I have knocked my camera over while trying to make this, but I can tell you that it was more than 4. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to start with this toilet paper roll right here. Now I am just going to use some shredded paper, and I'm just going to lightly fill that. Of course, one of the things that you can do when you're making toys like this, you could always invite your birds over to help, because I can guarantee you if you're using shredded paper like this, it's going to get everywhere anyways. And as we all know, if you have birds in your home, they definitely want to be willing participants in any amount of mess they can make. So now that I have this, I'm going to take a few of these wooden beads, and I'm just going to stick them right inside. I could put some on that side as well. Probably going to put a little more paper. And you can work in batches like this. Just do a little bit of paper. Maybe you want to do a couple of beads. Do a little bit of paper. Now I'm going to do a handful of banana chips, dried papaya, dried seeds. And you just sort of want to work all of that in there. So that gives you a nice variety of things. Then what you're going to want to do, you want to take your piece of newspaper, tissue paper, wrapping paper, if that's what you're using. You want to just go ahead, set that item right there. I'm actually probably going to turn this that way. So I'm going to roll it up. And then on the edges, find the edge of your toilet paper roll. Go ahead, grab it, and twist it. You always could, and I'm going to drop things everywhere. Well, that's fun. Again, if you had your bird participating, they would more than willingly go after all the items. So you can go ahead, twist this. You want to just make sure you twist it enough just that it holds. And of course, I have a bead that is trying to stick into that. So there's an idea of how easily that comes together. All right, guys, so as you can see, that's really all there is to it. It's not a very difficult item to put together at all. It's something that a lot of birds really, really enjoy as well. It encourages their natural destructive behaviors. They like to tear things apart, so all of the paper inside of that is something they can destroy. Things like the wooden beads are really, really exciting. They can chew into those. Those are going to take a little bit longer to destroy. And of course, you can always use food items in there to encourage them because a lot of birds really like those particular items. You want to make sure you're choosing those food items based on your individual bird as well. So if you're doing this for something like a macaw, you could obviously use things like pecans, walnuts, Brazil nuts. But since I am making this for something that has a little bit smaller beak, I went ahead and went with smaller food items. And the dried papaya in particular is a favorite for this bird. So I am excited to be able to give this to that bird. So, my question for you guys, if you are going to be making this toy for one of your animals, what would be the favorite food item or toy, small wooden blocks, anything like that, that you would put inside that you know would gather your animal's interest? If you liked this video, I definitely encourage you guys to go ahead, like the video. You want to make sure that you subscribe to the channel because I'm constantly putting out new content for you guys. So you definitely don't want to miss out on any of that. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and cut to the bird getting this toy because we all know that seeing a bird play with a toy is the whole reason most of you clicked on this video. So I do want to thank you guys so much for tuning into this video, watching it. But in the meantime, I've got to get going because I've got some cages to clean. All right, thanks, guys. Bye.